The North America you know is a graveyard, swept clean of the most heavily armored biological tanks to ever walk the earth. You see suburbs, highways, deer at the tree line. What stood here before was a kill zone. 15,000 years ago, this continent does not welcome you. It tests whether soft tissue deserves to remain intact. An Arctidus sea stands 11 feet tall, a mammalian siege engine towering over you with the authority of a moving scaffold. Even on all fours, it can meet a human face at eye level. The old frontier myth tells you that early people entered this world in balance with nature. The fossil record says something colder. They enter a biome ruled by predators with teeth longer than a Tyrannosaurus rex, herbivores sealed inside bone plating thick as fortress walls, and impact weapons built from tail, tendon, and mineral. You are not the apex here. You are skin. You are heat. You are a calorie package crossing open ground in winter. And yet the impossible fact is not that these organisms exist. The impossible fact is that humans remain. Naked primates with chipped stone move through a continent of siege engines and do not vanish. They do not just endure. They outlast the things that seem built to erase them. That is the paradox buried under shopping centers and asphalt. How does a soft-skinned ape survive a world engineered for muscle, armor, and ambush? How does something so breakable remain standing when everything around it looks overbuilt for war? The answer begins in an object small enough to fit in your palm. A Clovis point. 3 inches of fractured stone. Thin. Sharp. Fragile enough to seem obscene against what it faces. Because the first truth of Pleistocene America is scale. The second truth is mechanism. These animals are not large by accident. They are assembled. Tuned. Pressurized. Specialized. And one of them does not just carry giant teeth. It carries a body designed to fire them. Smilodon fatalis does not look like a cat once you understand the parts. The canines reach 11 inches, not ornamental fangs, but hydraulic guillotine blades longer than the teeth of a Tyrannosaurus rex. They do not exist for display. They exist to enter flesh at depth. To open the throat. To find arteries under hide. The jaw gape widens to an extreme angle, a biological hinge opening like a steel trap calibrated for one catastrophic insertion. You think of predators as generalists with options. Smilodon rejects options. It narrows itself into a kill sequence. Approach. Launch. Grip. Cut. That specialization is the terror. Its forelimbs carry dense muscle. Its scapulae, shoulder blades acting like suspension arms in a heavy machine chassis, anchor the strike. Its neck flexors, cable-thick muscle bands functioning like winch lines, drive the head downward after impact. Every structure points toward the same conclusion. This is not a cat with oversized teeth. It is an integrated kill platform. Bone, tendon, leverage, and motion converge on one act of controlled ruin. But the teeth are only the visible part. The true weapon is hidden in the launch system. Smilodon can generate a 12-foot vertical leap. Not a scramble. Not a bound. A violent upward deployment. The calcaneus, heel bone serving as a load-bearing spring block, compresses under tension. The Achilles tendon, a fibrous power cable storing elastic force, draws tight. Then the body releases that stored energy in a single upward detonation of muscle and geometry. The animal does not just jump. It uncoils. Like a shock absorber driven past tolerance and released into a target. This is what humans see in the brush. Not a beast. A mechanism waiting for range. And Smilodon is not alone in this architecture of violence. Arctidus sea moves through the same world at over 2,100 pounds, not just a carnivore, but an evolutionary bully. Its frame is a siege engine. Its long limbs are struts built for ground theft at scale. It may not need to kill when intimidation extracts the same result. A dire wolf pack labors over a carcass. A. Smilodon bleeds to secure a mammoth calf. Then this bear arrives. Height first. Mass second. Decision last. It walks in and takes what muscle has already paid for. From its perspective, humans do not look formidable. They look unfinished. A towering skull angles downward through cold air. It sees moving figures in the snow. Thin legs. Narrow shoulders. No claws worth respect. No armor. No fur worth mention. No canines worth calculation. Only upright bodies carrying small points of stone and the desperate cohesion of a social animal that knows it cannot survive alone. This is not the view of an equal meeting an equal. It is battlefield target acquisition. A sensor tower reading weak signatures across white ground. Then there is the other logic of the continent. Not speed. Not intimidation. Impact. Glyptotherium wears osteoderms, bony plates rooted in the dermis like interlocking armor tiles in a tank hull. 2 inches thick. 5 centimeters of mineral defense. About 8 times thicker than the shell of the thickest modern tortoise. A primitive spear does not glide into that surface. It stalls. Stone meets bone and loses its argument. The body underneath remains sealed. Then the tail moves. It is an articulated kinetic impactor. A wrecking ball grown from vertebrae. The rings of armor slide over one another with mechanical precision. The spinal base transmits force. The tail accelerates to 25 miles per hour. Then contact. Flesh ruptures. Bone fails. Sound becomes material. Not a crack you hear, but a crack you feel in your teeth. And against this wall of armor, against these teeth, against this height, there is still that small object. That Clovis point. Hold the image in your mind. An 11-foot bear. A cat armed with blades longer than a T-Rex tooth. An armored body sealed behind osteoderms. And in front of them, a sliver of chipped stone. For a moment, the scale of it all becomes almost offensive. Millions of years of specialization. Pressure-tested anatomies. Predators and herbivores engineered by cold, hunger, and attrition. Then a human hand lifts a brittle triangle of rock no longer than a finger, and the whole mythology of strength begins to split, because the answer to the paradox is not hidden in larger muscles or thicker bone, but in something far less visible and far more dangerous. Inside Smilodon, the mechanism reveals the weakness of perfection. The calcaneus compresses. The tendon stores force. The leap fires. The canines descend. Everything works with terrible elegance. But elegance is narrow. Specialization is a bargain with the current world. The body becomes supreme at one task and less fluent in everything else. Smilodon is lethal because it is committed. Glyptotherium is durable because it is committed. Arctidus dominates because it is committed. Each titan is a masterpiece of evolutionary concentration. Humans are not. That is why they remain. A Clovis point is not powerful because stone is stronger than Fong or armor. It is powerful because intelligence does not have to match biology on its own terms. It bypasses it. Coordinated hunters do not need thicker hide than Glyptotherium. They need angles. Timing. Numbers. Endurance. Memory. Communication. They read terrain. They exploit panic. They choose when to wound and when to wait. A fragile point of stone, driven by many hands and a planning mind, can open a body that spent hundreds of thousands of years optimizing for another form of battle. The megafauna do not fail because they are inferior. They fail because they are too exact for a world that begins to shift under them. This is the colder revelation. The titans are not weak. They are over-optimized. And the world that forges them is no sanctuary. It is a relentless, frozen Colosseum manufacturing extremes through punishment. You feel at first as resistance. A spear strikes a carapace and stops dead. The shock runs back through your wrist. Osteoderms, dermal bone plates functioning like ceramic armor modules, turn force into futility. Your shoulder absorbs the failure. The animal remains inside its shell of mineral certainty. Then heat erupts where cold should dominate. Mammoth blood spills across ice in dark sheets. Steam lifts from opened flesh. Winter receives it without ceremony. Warmth leaves the body and enters the air in visible ghosts. The ground does not care what died there. It only preserves the stain for a moment before freezing claims it. Darkness here is not an absence of light. It is an occupation of space. It fills the forest between trunks. It erases distance. It compresses your senses until every branch becomes a possible spine, every drift a crouched body, every silence a delay before impact. Night in this world does not hide the land. It hands the land back to the organisms built for it. Then sound arrives. A low-frequency roar from Arcturus moves through dense aspen parkland like pressure through sheet metal. It enters the chest before it enters the ear. Somewhere else, the tail of Glyptotherium completes its arc and bone shatters under a 25-mile-per-hour strike. The continent speaks in impacts, in breath clouds, in footfalls heavy enough to make snow fall from branches. Scale completes the insult. Smilodon teeth exceed a T-Rex fong in length. Castoroids, giant beaver, a rodent chassis enlarged into a timber-cutting machine, outweighs an adult German shepherd by 3 times. Glyptotherium carries the size and weight of a small car while walking on mammalian legs. You call this nature because the word feels harmless. It is not harmless. It is industrial in its cruelty. And it has time. Hundreds of thousands of years in the Pleistocene. Whole lineages crossing land bridges, entering new pressures, adapting into forms that look less like wildlife and more like verdicts. Smilodon gracilis disappears 500,000 years before the end, filtered out while its larger relatives persist. Even success does not grant permanence. Evolution keeps refining. Climate keeps selecting. Hunger keeps auditing the weak. Then, between roughly 11,000 and 13,000 years ago, the system collapses. Climate shifts. Human expansion spreads. The old titans fall out of the world they were built to dominate. Not because they were primitive. Not because they lacked sophistication. They were the peak expression of a brutal age. That is what makes their disappearance unbearable. If a continent can forge organisms this exact, this specialized, this physically complete, and still erase them in a geological instant, then the question is no longer what lived here. It is what survival ever means. You inherit the ending and mistake it for superiority. That is the final human error. We look at these extinct animals and speak as if they are failed drafts. Oversized experiments. Primitive dead ends. The evidence says the reverse. These megafauna are not mistakes. They are apex solutions. Titans of muscle, tendon, and mineral precision. Smilodon refines the act of killing into a single anatomical sentence. Glyptotherium refines defense until the body becomes a moving bunker. Arcturus refines intimidation until mass itself becomes a weapon. In their world, humans are not the standard by which life is judged. Humans are the anomaly. Soft-skinned. Under-armored. Under-toothed. Physically mediocre. And still dangerous. Because the trait that matters most is not always visible in the skeleton. Intelligence leaves fewer fossils than canines. Planning does not mineralize like osteoderms. Cooperation does not preserve as cleanly as a femur. Yet those invisible systems turn a weak primate into an extinction-scale force. Not through nobility. Not through harmony. Through abstraction. Through memory shared across individuals. Through coordinated violence applied with patience. That is why the Clovis point matters. Return to it. A 3-inch spearhead of chipped stone. Thin enough to break. Small enough to overlook. In Act I of this continent, it looks obscene beside 11-inch teeth and 2-inch armor. By the end, it becomes the most important object in the frame. It is not muscle that conquers the earth. Not thicker bone. Not a louder roar. It is a fragile shard of rock directed by a mind that can imagine a future target, recruit other minds into the same plan, and deliver force where biology is least prepared to absorb it. That should not make you proud without reservation. It should trouble you. Because if intelligence wins by bypassing the old rules, then evolution does not crown the strongest body. It rewards the system most capable of rewriting the battlefield. For a time, that system is us. But the graveyard beneath North America offers no promise that our kind stands outside the same arithmetic. The mammoth falls. Smilodon vanishes. Arctidus dissolves into bone, then sediment, then myth. Their designs once looked unassailable. Their disappearance proves that no chassis, no weapon, no sensory architecture, no empire of flesh is protected from revision. We stand on cleared ground and call ourselves permanent. The fossils below our feet suggest something else. If the most heavily armored, perfectly engineered biological titans on this continent vanish in a geological blink, what makes us think our fragile, soft-skinned species will last any longer?